The cap felt heavier than it should have, a symbol of achievement. And yet it rested on my head like a burden I never quite knew how to carry. The sun was too bright on that Saturday afternoon, too warm for my skin. The world around me seemed to pulse with excitement, but I was on the edge of it, staring into the vast emptiness of an unreturned call. I checked my phone again, nothing. No message. No congratulations, just silence. The ceremony was wrapping up, and I could hear the chatter of students and their families, but I felt untethered. A distant observer. I was used to that. My father had never been the kind of man to show up for the small things. The day-to-day moments that I needed him most had always been a blur to him. But this should have been different, shouldn't it have? I think it's time for a selfie, Sarah said, draping her arm over my shoulders. She was smiling, her phone in hand. Her voice was light, but I heard the edge in it. She knew. She knew how much I wanted to hear from him. Sure, I said, forcing a smile. Let's do it. The picture snapped, but it wasn't really me in it. It was a woman standing in front of a camera, trying hard to fit into something she didn't belong in. You look amazing, by the way, Sarah said as she looked over the photo. I know this day wasn't exactly what you imagined, but yeah, I cut her off. It's fine. She frowned, sensing the distance in my voice, but she didn't push. She didn't need to. It was clear. I didn't need anyone else reminding me that this day, of all days, had been a reminder of everything I'd never had from him. I stepped away from Sarah, letting the crowd swallow her up as I walked toward the edge of the lawn. The rest of the graduates were mingling, but I wasn't there. I was somewhere else, waiting for something for him. My father, or the ghost of him. I pulled my phone out again, staring at the screen, scrolling through my contacts. I tapped on his name, then hovered over the call button, my thumb pausing. Why should I even bother? I'd been waiting for him to reach out for as long as I could remember. But today, of all days, I thought, maybe it would be different. It wasn't. He hadn't called. He hadn't even sent a message. It wasn't that I expected him to fly in, sit in the audience, and cheer me on like some proud father. I wasn't that naive. But to not even acknowledge the achievement felt harsh, distant. So distant that it felt like he was a stranger who happened to share my blood. A part of me wondered if he even knew the date, if he had even thought about it. I'd always been the child who was invisible to him when it didn't suit his schedule, and today was no different. There was no acknowledgement from him. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the phone, my thumb itching to press the button. But I didn't. Instead, I turned off the screen and slipped it into my pocket. It wasn't just today. It was everything leading up to this moment. Every time I had waited for him to show up, for him to notice, to be proud, to care. It never happened, so why should I expect it now? Hey, you good? It was Sarah again. Her voice softer this time. I didn't answer immediately. I didn't need to. She could tell. Are you going to call him? She asked after a beat. She wasn't asking out of pity. It was a genuine question. I looked at her, shaking my head. What's the point? He won't answer anyway. You don't know that for sure, she said, her voice gentle but firm. Maybe you should just know. I interrupted. I don't want to. Sarah watched me, her eyes scanning my face. It hurts, doesn't it? She asked quietly. I nodded, the weight of the moment pressing in on me. I didn't need her to say anything more. I didn't need to explain the ache that had been a constant companion for years. The truth was, I didn't feel angry anymore. Not really. It was just a quiet resignation. A quiet acceptance that this was the way it had always been, and probably always would be. A few more minutes passed before Sarah spoke again. You're allowed to feel pissed about this. I don't need permission to feel anything, I said. The words sharp, but not directed at her. I wasn't mad at Sarah. I was mad at him. I was mad at the man who had been there for nothing and everything at once. But I wasn't going to keep waiting for something that would never come. Sarah stepped closer. You've worked so hard, you don't need him to recognize you, Leela. Not anymore. I felt the sting of those words. But there was something in them that pulled at something inside me. Something that had been dormant for far too long. I met her gaze, searching her face for reassurance. But it wasn't reassurance I needed, it was a moment of clarity. I wasn't going to let him take this away from me. Not today. I know. I whispered the words like a vow. But it still hurts. I know it does, Sarah said, giving me a tight hug. But you're not alone in this. You've got people who see you, who are proud of you. I nodded, swallowing hard as the weight of it all crashed into me. For a second, I felt the tears pressing behind my eyes. But I wouldn't let them fall. Not today. I straightened up, pulling myself back together. The day wasn't perfect, but it was mine. And I was going to take it. Let's get out of here, I said, my voice steady again. There's a bar in the city I've been wanting to try. Sarah smiled, looping her arm through mine. Sounds good. I was done waiting. And if he wouldn't show up, I'd make damn sure to show up for myself. The house was quiet when I came back. It always was, a strange kind of quiet, where even the smallest sounds felt exaggerated. The hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the clock, the distant rustle of trees outside. Everything felt suspended. I dropped my bag by the door and kicked off my shoes, the echoes of the ceremony still ringing in my ears. The light was dim as I stepped into the living room, but there was no one here, no surprise. My mother's routines were predictable, as were my father's absences. I sank onto the couch, staring at the phone in my hand. A message from Sarah, a congratulatory text from my friend Jada, a dozen other polite reminders that the day was important, but none of them held the weight I needed. I unlocked the screen and stared at his name again. But I didn't press call. I didn't expect him to answer. There was a soft sound behind me, and I turned to see my mother standing in the doorway. Her eyes were warm, but guarded, like she could tell us something was wrong without asking. She was always like that, tuned into the quiet spaces in our lives. "Hey," she said gently. Stepping inside, her voice was almost too soft, like it might break if she spoke louder. "How was it?" I forced a smile. "It was fine." She sat beside me, pulling her cardigan tightly around her shoulders. She always looked like she was trying to make herself small, as though her presence was too much for a room. I didn't want her to see it. I didn't want her to see that the day had felt hollow, like a hollow ache that never really went away. "You look beautiful in that gown," she said, smoothing a few stray hairs back behind my ear. She always tried to comfort me, but it was never enough, not in the way I needed. "Thanks," I murmured. My mother fell silent for a moment, her hands folded in her lap, and I knew what was coming, the question I could never fully answer, the one that always felt like a weight I wasn't allowed to feel. "Did he call?" Her voice cracked, just slightly, but it was enough for me to hear, enough for me to feel the fissures between us. I glanced down at the phone again, but I didn't answer. "I couldn't, no," I said finally, the word tasting bitter in my mouth. She sighed, a long, drawn-out sound like a breath she had been holding for years. "I'm sorry," she said, her words careful, like she was stepping through a field of broken glass. "I really thought he would." I didn't say anything. The silence stretched between us, heavier now, suffocating in its truth. It wasn't just today, this one moment. It was everything leading up to it, the quiet years, the empty promises, the absence that had always been there, lurking in the corners of my life. "I'm fine," I lied. "I just didn't expect anything different." My mother turned away, her gaze landing on the framed photo of us on the wall, the one where I was young, a little girl beaming with her father's arm around her. She had put it there years ago, hoping, I think, that it might bring him back. Or maybe it was to remind herself of who he once was. "He doesn't deserve to be in your life like this," she said, her voice low, almost an afterthought. "Not when he's been so absent." I shifted uncomfortably, pushing myself off the couch and walking to the window. I looked out, watching the branches of the oak tree sway in the wind, the way the sunlight barely touched the ground. The day had been too bright, too harsh, and now it felt wrong. "I don't know if it's about what he deserves," I said, my voice steady but thin. "It's about what I've gotten used to." I heard her move behind me, the soft shuffling of her slippers against the hardwood. "You shouldn't have to get used to this," she said, her voice almost pleading. "You shouldn't have to make excuses for him." I turned to face her then, finally meeting her eyes. "I'm not making excuses, I don't know how to expect anything different. He's always been like this." Her lips pressed into a thin line, and I could see the frustration building in her. "You shouldn't let him off the hook like this. Not anymore." "Let him off the hook?" The words hit me harder than I expected. What am I supposed to do? Keep waiting for him to suddenly change? Keep pretending that this isn't who he is? I swallowed hard. "I've done that for years, Mom. I'm tired of pretending. Tired of wanting something that's never going to happen." She stared at me, her eyes filled with something I couldn't quite place. Maybe pity. Or maybe something worse, the quiet realization that she hadn't been enough either. "You're angry," she said softly. "I can see it in your eyes, and it's okay to be angry." "Am I allowed to be?" I said, the question slipping out before I could stop it. Am I allowed to be angry at him for being a ghost in my life? Am I allowed to be angry that he didn't care enough to show up today? Her shoulders slumped slightly. She looked older in that moment, the years etched in her face more than they had been earlier. "Yes, you are," she said, her voice breaking just enough to show the cracks. "You've always been allowed to be angry." I stepped back, running my fingers through my hair, trying to calm the storm inside me. "I don't even know what I want from him anymore," I said quietly. "I don't know if I want anything. I just wanted him to see me, just once." "You don't need him to see you," she said. Her voice had shifted, a touch of quiet power I didn't often hear from her. "You're more than him, you're more than his absence." I didn't answer right away. The words hung there, heavy in the room. I couldn't deny the truth in them, but part of me still ached for something I couldn't quite reach. I don't know how to be anything more than the person who's always waiting for him, I said. Barely a whisper. My mother moved closer, her hand gently resting on my shoulder. She didn't say anything more. She didn't need to. It was the silence that spoke for her. The silence that had always been our companion. Total word count, 1,200 words. Phone buzzed on the table in front of me, the screen lighting up with a name I had been half expecting, but still hadn't quite prepared for. Naomi Brooks, my publisher. I glanced at it, took a deep breath and picked up the call. Congratulations, Leela. Naomi's voice was all business, but there was a noticeable warmth beneath it, a practiced enthusiasm that I could never quite decipher. You've got a deal. We've got the green light from the press. Your book's going to be published. The words hung there for a moment, and I was quiet, just staring at the coffee cup in front of me. My fingers tightened around it, but it didn't make me feel any less hollow. That's great, I finally said, my voice flat. I'm happy, Naomi chuckled, but it sounded more like an awkward attempt to smooth over a silence. You should be, Leela. This is a huge step for you. The book is going to make waves. Your voice, your story, it's powerful. This is your moment. I nodded even though she couldn't see me. I know. I've worked for it. You've earned it, she agreed. Now, let's talk about the dedication. We need to get that locked in for the print version. Any ideas? I paused, the question settling in like a weight on my chest. The dedication. It seemed like such a small thing in the grand scheme of what was happening, but somehow it felt monumental. Who would I acknowledge? Who would I thank? And more importantly, who would I leave out? I let out a quiet breath, watching the steam rise from my cup. I've been thinking about it, I said carefully. I want to thank the people who helped me get here, the ones who believed in me. Of course, that makes sense, Naomi replied, eager, not noticing the hesitation in my voice. But there's one name that seems pretty obvious to include, don't you think? I didn't have to ask her which name she meant. I'm not sure, I said slowly. It's complicated. There was a slight shift on the other end, a change in Naomi's tone. She was pragmatic. Businesslike, complicated, she repeated, her voice softening just enough to show she understood the undercurrent in my words. You mean your father? I gripped the phone tighter, letting the silence hang for a moment before answering. Yeah, I finally said, the word a weight that fell from my lips. I mean him. Well, Naomi began, her voice becoming more neutral. It's important to consider the message this sends. Your father, the person who brought you into this world, he should be acknowledged. It's expected, and it would look better for your story, for your brand, if you include him. I felt a flash of anger rise in me, but I held it back. Naomi didn't know. She didn't understand the years of silence, the void he had left in my life. She didn't know how many birthdays I spent hoping for a call that never came, or how many hours I sat waiting for a conversation that would never happen. Look, Naomi, I said, my voice steady, I get the business side of things. I know what you're saying, but I'm not doing this for appearances. This book, it's my story, and it's mine alone. I'm not going to put his name in there just because it's what people expect. There was a brief silence before she responded. I understand, Leela, but it's a big risk. People will notice, and it could what? I cut in, my voice sharper now. Make me look ungrateful, or like I'm holding a grudge. I paused, the thought twisting in my stomach. Maybe I am, but I'm not going to pretend that I'm okay with the way he's treated me. Not anymore. Naomi didn't answer immediately. I could almost hear her considering, weighing her words. I get it, she said, quieter now, like she was trying to respect my decision without pushing too hard. It's your choice, Leela. But just so you know, the decision you make here could impact how the public sees you. The narrative you craft, it matters. I know, I replied, a tightness in my chest. I know. The conversation moved on after that, but the weight of the dedication hung over me. As Naomi outlined the next steps for the book's release, I barely heard her. My mind was still on my father, his absence, his disregard for me. He didn't deserve a place in the story. He never had. When the call ended, I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone. The words she had said swirling in my mind. I thought about all the missed opportunities, the unanswered calls, the things he had stolen from me, not just in those moments, but in all the years he had been gone. I could have added his name to the dedication. I could have made it look like I was still waiting for some kind of acknowledgement from him. It would have been the easier choice, but I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't waiting for him anymore. I stood up from the chair, walking over to the desk where the manuscript sat, pages of my life, my struggles, my story, laid out in front of me. My fingers hovered over the page. The words of the dedication were simple but final. To the ones who have stood by me, who have loved me, even when I didn't love myself, this is for you. That was it. The people who mattered, the people who had been there, through the silence, through everything. They were the ones who deserved to be acknowledged. I closed the file, took a deep breath, and felt the weight of the decision settle over me. This was it. This was my moment. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that from me, not anymore. The days after graduation blurred together. The excitement of my accomplishment had worn off quickly, leaving only the echo of his absence. The phone remained silent, just like it always had. I didn't know why I had thought this time would be different. I hadn't been foolish enough to believe he'd suddenly show up. Yet I still found myself waiting for a message, a letter, something. But there was nothing. The emptiness felt louder with every passing hour. And I started questioning myself. What was I expecting? Why did I keep holding on to this idea that one day he would care enough to show up? It was late one night, long after I had tried to distract myself with anything I could. I sat by the window, the soft hum of the city below filling the silence. My fingers drummed on the arm of the chair, the rhythm almost comforting. I had been avoiding thinking about it all day, but now it was impossible to escape. I reached for my phone again. I hadn't checked it in a few hours, but the same names were still there. Sarah's texts, a message from Jada about dinner plans, and a missed call from my mother. But nothing from him. Nothing. I felt that familiar sting in my chest, that hollow space that had been carved out over the years. I was so damn tired of feeling like this. You're still waiting for him, aren't you? Sarah's voice was a quiet interruption, almost as if she had read my mind. She had a knack for showing up at exactly the wrong or right moment. I turned my head to see her standing in the doorway, her face soft but knowing. She'd always had that way of seeing me without trying to. Maybe it was because we'd known each other long enough to understand the unsaid parts. Always, I muttered, tossing the phone onto the table. It's pathetic, right? I should be over this by now. She walked over, sitting across from me with that steady calm she always carried. Her eyes studied me carefully, and there was a weight to the silence between us. But it wasn't uncomfortable. It was understanding. She didn't push, but I could feel her waiting for me to say more. I keep telling myself he'll reach out. That maybe this time will be different, I said, the words leaving my mouth before I even realized I had started. But there's nothing, not a word. And I'm starting to think I'm the one who's been wrong all along. Sarah's gaze softened, but there was a firmness in her tone when she spoke. You're not wrong. And it's not your fault that he's a ghost in your life. I shook my head, staring down at my hands. It feels like it is. I've been waiting for years. I keep telling myself that one day I'll get the letter, the message. Maybe that's why I can't let go of it. Maybe I've just imagined all this time that something would change, but nothing has. She leaned forward slightly, her voice dropping into something quieter, something more intimate. So what are you going to do about it? I paused, the question hanging in the air like it was something I had never considered. I hadn't thought about the next step, not really. What did I do when the waiting stopped feeling like hope and started feeling like desperation? I don't know, I whispered. What if I was wrong all along? What if I've been the one holding on to something that wasn't ever going to happen? What if I just convinced myself that I could be different, even when it never was? Sarah took a deep breath, her eyes narrowing thoughtfully. You've been trying to fix something that's not broken, Leela. He's broken, not you, and it's not your job to put the pieces back together. I'm not trying to fix him, I shot back, the words coming quicker now. I just wanted him to see me. I wanted him to notice, even just once, that I existed. My voice trembled for a second, but I pushed it down. But now I just feel stupid. Like I've been waiting for something that was never going to come. Maybe it's my fault. Maybe I've been the one who's wrong all along. Sarah's eyes never left mine as she spoke, her tone unwavering. You're not wrong. It's okay to feel hurt, it's okay to be angry. But don't you dare blame yourself for his absence. You didn't create this. You didn't make him disappear. The words settled over me like a blanket I didn't know I needed. The anger had been building for so long that I hadn't even noticed it taking shape until now. It wasn't just sadness anymore. It was frustration. It was betrayal. I had been waiting for him to show up for so long, but he'd never planned on it. The realization was sharp, but necessary. Do you ever think, I asked quietly, that maybe I'm just as bad as him? For holding on to this for so long. Sarah leaned back in her chair, her gaze thoughtful. You're not him, and you're not bad for wanting something from him. You've just been waiting in the wrong place for too long. I looked at her, the truth of her words sinking in deeper than I'd expected. The anger was still there, sharp and bitter in my throat, but now it felt like something I could hold, something I could do something with. I don't know what to do with all this, I said, letting out a breath that felt too heavy to carry on my own. Then start by letting yourself feel it, Sarah said, her voice steady but soft. The Anger, the hurt, the frustration, it's yours. Don't bury it anymore and don't apologize for it. I nodded, the weight of her words lingering in the air between us. Maybe this was the first step. Maybe it wasn't about waiting anymore. Maybe it was about letting myself feel all of it, the anger, the hurt, the resentment, and then moving on. The phone buzzed again. This time, I didn't reach for it. I knew what it would be. Another text, another email. Another reminder that nothing would change, and that was okay. I wasn't waiting anymore. You're right, I said quietly. I can't keep waiting for him. Exactly, Sarah replied. It's time to stop waiting. I was sitting in the corner of the cafe, nursing a cup of coffee that had long gone cold, when I overheard the conversation. It was impossible not to. The voices carried, and the man sitting just a few feet away was talking about a conference he'd attended that weekend. The timing caught my attention, though it was the location that sent a jolt through me. Yeah, I'm still recovering from that conference. Had to fly in for it right by the university. The man was saying, barely pausing between sentences. Great turnout. You should have been there. I froze. The university, the weekend of my graduation. The words echoed in my mind, but I didn't dare move, didn't dare speak. I was just a few feet away from the stranger, and yet, I could already feel a shift, a tightening in my chest. I knew who this was about, and I wasn't ready to hear it. I stood up abruptly, hoping the noise of the chair scraping against the floor would cover my departure. But then he said something that stopped me dead in my tracks. Yeah? Your colleague's daughter graduated that weekend, right? Lila? Funny, she was right there, a few blocks away. Would have been nice if your friend had made it to see her. The name landed in my chest like a brick. My father's colleague, an old man with a gravelly voice, barely seemed to notice me as I stared at him, the words sinking deeper, knotting in my stomach. Yeah, the man continued, oblivious to the effect his words had on me. Her dad didn't even show up, though. He was too busy with the conference. I don't know how I didn't explode right then and there, my fingers clenched around my bag, the pressure in my chest building until it almost felt suffocating. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. He hadn't even thought to call. He hadn't even bothered to show up despite being blocks away. I forced myself to walk out of the cafe, trying to maintain some semblance of control. But the fury started to bubble up as soon as I stepped into the street. The sidewalks were packed with people, the city bustling around me. But all I could hear was the sound of that man's voice, the casual disregard. He hadn't even considered how it might feel to me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, dragging me out of my spiraling thoughts. I pulled it out, seeing Sarah's name flash across the screen. I answered it without thinking. Lila? Hey, are you okay? Her voice was tight, like she could already hear the tension on the other end. Yeah, I'm fine. I lied, my hand shaking slightly as I gripped the phone. Just out for a walk. You don't sound fine, Sarah said, her concern bleeding through. What's going on? I shook my head despite her not being able to see me. Nothing, I just found out something. My voice faltered. He was here, the whole weekend. There was a pause, the kind that made me feel like I was letting the air leak out of me. Sarah didn't say anything at first, but I could hear her breath catch. She knew exactly what I was talking about. Lila? She started softly. You're telling me he was in town, and he didn't even show up? No. I spat out, the words tasting bitter. He didn't call. He didn't text, nothing. He was right here, just blocks away, at that damn conference. And he couldn't even make the effort. Sarah's voice was sharp now, her anger matching mine. I'm going to kill him. I couldn't help but laugh, a dark, hollow laugh. Yeah, well, that might be a bit of an overreaction, is it though? Seriously, Lila, this is beyond ridiculous. He's had how many chances? How many times has he ignored you, maid? You feel like you don't matter? He couldn't show up for your graduation, and now you find out he was right there? He's a coward. I stood still on the sidewalk, feeling the anger surge again. I don't get it. What did he expect? That I wouldn't care? That I wouldn't notice? He couldn't even bother to tell me he was in town, let alone show up. I was supposed to be his daughter, and he couldn't even pretend for one damn day. I don't know why you're still trying to figure it out, Sarah said bluntly. I get it. You've been trying to make sense of this for years, trying to find some reason for why he's like this. But there isn't one. He's just a selfish prick, and it's not your fault. I closed my eyes, leaning against a brick wall for support. It's just, I don't know, this whole time I kept telling myself that maybe he'd show up for something important. I thought maybe this would be the one time he would actually make an effort. You've been holding out for a man who doesn't care about you, Sarah said, her voice quiet but firm, and it's killing you. The words hit like a punch to the stomach. She was right. I'd been waiting for him to come through, for him to show up, for him to prove he could be more than the ghost he'd been for years, and all along, I'd been the one fooling myself. Maybe it's time to stop waiting, Sarah added softly. I let out a shaky breath. I don't know if I can just let go. Not after everything, you don't have to let go completely. Sarah replied, her voice steady, giving me something I didn't expect understanding. But you can stop waiting, it's time to stop. Putting your life on pause for someone who's never going to change. I swallowed hard, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. I guess I've been doing that for too long, haven't I? Yeah, she said gently. But you're allowed to stop now, you don't owe him anything. You've done enough. Now it's your turn. I leaned back, resting my head against the wall as I closed my eyes. The anger was still there, burning, bright in my chest. But it wasn't the same kind of helpless anger I'd felt before. This was a different kind of fire. It was the kind that came with clarity. I'm done, I whispered. Good, Sarah replied, her voice warm with approval. I'm proud of you, and for the first time in years, I was proud of myself too. I sat in the therapist's office, hands clenched in my lap, feeling the pulse of rage still simmering beneath my skin. I hadn't expected to feel like this, not after everything. But the discovery about my father, the casual way the colleague had mentioned his conference, had been a punch in the gut. It wasn't just the missed graduation. It was every year, every moment I'd hoped for something more, only to be met with nothing. A ghost in my life. I had spent so much time pretending I could be okay with it, that I could move on, that I could fill the spaces he left with other things. But it was all a lie. I stared out the window at the city's skyline, trying to steady my breathing. But it was useless. The anger was still there, pulsing through me like a relentless tide. How could he be so indifferent? How could he live his life and not even care that I existed? Leela. Dr. Keller's voice was soft, measured, as always. She knew when to give me space and when to pull me back. Today, I could feel her presence like a tether, trying to keep me grounded. But I wasn't sure I wanted to be grounded. What's going on? I turned my head slowly, meeting her calm, knowing gaze. I found out something today, I said, my voice a little tighter than I meant. He was in town for the weekend of my graduation. He didn't show up, didn't even tell me he was here. I found out from one of his colleagues. Dr. Keller waited a moment before responding, her tone gentle but insistent. And how does that make you feel? I didn't have to think about it, the words came without effort. Burning out of me, it makes me feel like nothing, like I've been nothing but an afterthought in his life, a footnote in his world. And I don't know if I'm angry because he doesn't care, or if I'm angry because I've been waiting for him to care all these years. She nodded, leaning forward slightly, her voice calm as always. It's okay to feel that anger, Leela. It's okay to be angry that he hasn't been there for you. But it's also important to understand what you want to do with that anger. I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. I don't know, I whispered. I don't know what to do with any of it. I keep thinking I should be able to let go. But how do I let go when I'm still hoping, still wishing for something that'll never come? Dr. Keller's eyes softened. You don't have to let go of the hope you had, but you do need to let go of the expectation. It's not about erasing the past. It's about recognizing that what you've been waiting for isn't coming, and that you can't keep putting your life on hold for something you can't control. I felt a sting behind my eyes, but I refused to let the tears fall. I had done enough of that. I had been the one waiting, the one holding on to something that was never there. I needed to stop. I needed to make a choice, a real one. I was going to dedicate my book to him, I said, the words leaving my lips before I could stop them. The thought of it, of putting his name in that dedication, made my chest tight. But I couldn't ignore the impulse I had once had to do it, to give him something even if he hadn't deserved it. I was going to give him that one thing, even though I know it doesn't mean anything to him. Dr. Keller was quiet for a moment, watching me closely. Then, she asked, and now? How do you feel about that decision? I didn't have to think. I don't want to, I said, the words firming up in my chest. I'm not giving him that. Not anymore. I've given him enough of myself. I've spent my whole life waiting for him to care. And now, I realize that nothing will change unless I make a change. I'm not giving him the power to be in that part of my life anymore. The realization settled on me like a heavy weight. But it wasn't oppressive. It felt like a shift, like something inside me realigning. The choice wasn't easy, but it was mine. And for the first time, I felt like I could finally choose. I can't keep pretending he matters, I said, my voice quiet but steady. He hasn't shown up for me in years. Why should he show up now? Why should I give him something that he didn't earn? You don't need his approval, Leela, Dr. Keller said softly. You don't need his validation. This decision, this act of choosing yourself, is what will give you peace. I nodded slowly. The anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface, but it no longer felt like something I needed to carry. It felt like something I could put down. Thank you, I whispered, not sure if I was thanking her for the clarity or for the permission to finally let go. You're welcome, she said, her voice soft, almost like a mother's. Remember, this is your story. You get to decide who's in it and who isn't. As I left her office, the weight of the decision settled into my bones. I was done waiting for someone who would never show up, done giving pieces of myself to someone who hadn't cared. The book wouldn't carry his name. It would carry mine and the people who had truly been there for me. The ones who had shown up. Even when he hadn't. The streets outside were bustling. The noise of the city like white noise in my ears. But for the first time in years I didn't feel like I was invisible. I felt seen, heard, and strong. The anger had transformed into something else. Something I could work with. Something I could use to rebuild. The decision was final. The choice was mine. And I wasn't going to wait for him anymore. Asterisk asterisk. The screen glowed in front of me. The cursor blinking impatiently. The manuscript was finished. The chapters were there. The words carefully chosen. The emotions laid out in black and white. It was real now. This book was happening, and yet the dedication, what should have been a simple line of gratitude, had become something else entirely. It was heavy with meaning, heavy with the choices I'd made over the last few months. I leaned back in my chair, running my fingers over the keys, unsure how to start. I had thought about it, of course, countless times. I had even written several versions, each one more disconnected from reality than the last. It wasn't that I didn't know who I wanted to honor. I had a list in my head, a small, tight-knit group of people who had been there for me when no one else had. People who had believed in me when I was still learning to believe in myself. People who had stayed even when it would have been easier to walk away. But my father, my mind kept returning to him. He had always been a shadow on the edges of my life, an absence I couldn't escape. I had wanted for so long for him to show up, to step into the light and say something, anything. But he hadn't, and now, with everything settled, with everything I had accomplished, the weight of that absence was too much. His name would not appear in this book. I typed the first line carefully, then deleted it. And then I did it again. Each time, the words didn't feel right. Nothing felt like it belonged. Not until I heard the familiar tap of a knock on my door. Leela, the voice was warm, steady. It was Ava, my mentor. The one person who had supported me through this entire process. Not just in writing, but in life. Her steady presence was the constant I had needed when everything else had felt uncertain. And, right now, as I stared at the screen, it was the grounding I needed. I opened the door and Ava stood there, her arms folded across her chest, wearing the same calm expression she always did. She was older than me, but not by much. Her hair was streaked with silver, and her eyes always carried a wisdom I admired. I wasn't sure how I had ended up so lucky to have someone like her in my corner, but I wasn't about to question it. "Are you making progress?" she asked, her gaze flicking to the screen behind me. She already knew what I was struggling with. She had watched me fight through every doubt, every word, every fear that my story wouldn't be enough. It had taken everything I had to get this far, and now it was time to make the final choice. "I'm stuck," I admitted, turning away from the screen, suddenly feeling exposed. "I can't figure out how to do this. I know what I want to say, but I don't know how." Ava stepped inside and sat down next to me, her presence like a rock, anchoring me in a way I hadn't known I needed. "You're overthinking it," she said softly, picking up the pen I had set on the desk, twirling it between her fingers as if she was deciding whether or not to use it. "The dedication is yours to write. You don't have to explain yourself to anyone, certainly not him." I swallowed hard, the words tasting bitter. I keep thinking, maybe I should include him, just his name, even if I don't mean it. Maybe it would be easier to pretend, to just let it go. I looked at her, my frustration rising. I don't know if I can let go of the hope that he'll change, that he'll somehow see me, even now, even after everything. Ava was quiet for a long moment, letting the weight of what I had said hang in the air. Finally, she spoke, her voice low and measured. The kind of voice you only use when you know someone needs to hear the truth. "You're not writing this for him," she said firmly, her eyes locking onto mine. "You're not writing it to get his approval. You've spent too much of your life trying to prove yourself to someone who never cared. This book, this moment, it's for you. You've worked hard for this, Leela. And you've earned the right to tell your story the way it deserves to be told. Without his name, without his influence." I nodded, the sting of her words cutting deeper than I expected. She was right, of course. I had been waiting for something that would never come. All these years, I had built a narrative around the idea that he could still show up, that he could still step in and be the father I had always needed. But he wasn't, and he hadn't been for a long time. I turned back to the screen, the cursor still blinking at me, waiting. This wasn't about him anymore. It was about the people who had been there when I needed them most. The people who had loved me, not because of who my father was, but because of who I had become. I took a deep breath and began to type. "To the ones who loved me when I didn't know how to love myself. To the ones who believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself, this book is for you. The words felt right, they felt true, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was doing something. For me. Ava sat back, watching me with a soft smile as I finished typing the last sentence. See? I knew you had it in you. I shook my head, letting out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. I couldn't do it without you, I said quietly, turning to look at her. She gave me a gentle, reassuring smile. You've always had it in you. I just helped you see it. The moment lingered, heavy but comforting. I looked back at the dedication, the final words now on the screen, and felt a sense of peace settle over me. This wasn't about what I had lost. It was about what I had gained. You've reclaimed your story, Leela, Ava said, standing up to leave. Now go tell it, the world is waiting. And with that, I knew it was time. It was time to let go of the past and step into my future. The dedication was done, the choice made. And for the first time, I wasn't looking back. The day my book was released, I woke up with a knot in my stomach. I had expected the rush of excitement, the wave of validation after all the months of editing, rewriting, and wondering if I was good enough. This was supposed to be a moment of triumph. But it wasn't, not entirely. I stood in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. The woman I saw wasn't the person I had been a year ago. She was stronger now, more self-assured. But that woman was still carrying the weight of a father who had never bothered to show up. The book had been out for hours, and I had already received messages, texts, and mails, and even a few reviews online. Some were from people I knew, but the majority were from strangers, readers who had connected with my story, my struggle, my voice, and those messages, they were overwhelming. But none of them came from him. Not one. I sat down at my desk, staring at the glowing screen of my phone. It was silent. Not a word from my father. Not even a cursory congratulations or good job. Nothing. My thumb hovered over the keyboard, and I almost typed his name. I almost called him. But I stopped myself. He hadn't been a part of my life for years. Why would I expect him to be now? The silence was louder than any words he could have said. It echoed in my ears, gnawed at my insides, and left a bitter taste in my mouth. It felt like a final blow, as if he was pretending I didn't exist at all. The notification bar blinked, and I shook myself out of the daze. The messages kept coming. Some were from people I hadn't heard from in years, others from complete strangers. Their words were kind, full of praise. It was strange, this sense of connection with people I had never met. I opened one of the messages. Your story is incredible. I've been where you are. It was like reading my own life. Another. Thank you for writing this. It made me feel seen. I'm not alone. They kept coming, flooding my phone, filling me with something I couldn't name. I scrolled through them, each one a little more emotional than the last. People were opening up to me, telling me their stories, and in return, I shared mine. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed. This was it. This was what I had wanted. This was why I had written the book in the first place, to connect, to reach people, to let them know they weren't alone. And it was working, but still, the absence of his voice lingered. It sat with me like a shadow, a silent accusation. Why hadn't he reached out? Why hadn't he said anything? Leela. I looked up to see Sarah standing in the doorway, her smile wide but hesitant. She had been with me from the beginning, through the late nights and early mornings, the doubts, the rewrites. She knew what this book meant, but she also knew what the silence from my father meant. You okay? She asked, her voice gentle but filled with concern. I nodded, but the words felt empty. Yeah, I'm fine, it's just a lot. She walked over and sat on the edge of my desk. It's a big deal. People are connecting with you. This is what you wanted, right? Yeah. I forced a smile, but it didn't reach my eyes. It's just strange. Sarah tilted her head, studying me closely. What's strange? I leaned back in my chair, my fingers tightening around the phone. He hasn't said anything, not a word. I don't know why I thought he would, but I trailed off, not sure how to explain the heaviness of it. You're waiting for something that isn't coming, Leela. Sarah said softly. He's not going to change, and this is what you're getting from your readers. From all these people, it's everything you need. I let out a shaky breath, blinking back the sting in my eyes. I thought I would be stronger about it. I thought the silence wouldn't hurt. Sarah's expression softened. Of course it hurts. But you know what? You don't need him anymore. You've got all these people who see you, who hear you. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened another message. I just finished your book. I cried the whole way through. I don't have a father like yours, but I understand what it's like to be abandoned. The words hit me harder than I expected. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to swallow the lump in my throat. This was it. This was the connection I had been craving, not from him, but from these people who knew, who understood. I'm proud of you, Sarah said, breaking through my thoughts. You've done it. You've shared your story, and people are responding. They're going to remember your name. Leela, not his. I nodded, her words sinking in, comforting me in a way I hadn't expected. The silence from my father was still there, still gnawing at me, but it didn't feel as heavy now. It was his loss, his choice. Thank you, I whispered, not knowing if I was thanking Sarah for her support, or if I was thanking the universe for the unexpected strength that had come from within me. She smiled, her eyes full of warmth. You've got this. I turned back to my phone, scrolling through more messages. The words on the screen were now my lifeline, my reminder that I wasn't alone in this. My readers were out there, people who had been through what I had, who understood what it meant to survive, to move on, and in that moment I realized something. His absence wasn't a wound anymore. It was just a fact I could live with. The book was out, and no matter what, I had made it. My phone buzzed, and for a moment I froze. The screen lit up with his name. I hadn't expected this. I hadn't even realized how much I was bracing for it until now. My father. I stared at it for a long time, my thumb hovering over the screen. What could he possibly want now? What could he say that would matter? I hadn't heard from him in years, and now, after all this time, he was reaching out. I didn't want to pick up. I didn't want to hear his voice, but I did. I had to, and so I swiped to answer, taking a deep breath before I spoke. Hello, Leela. His voice was just as cold as I remembered it. Smooth and unbothered. I've been meaning to reach out, just got around to finishing your book. I felt a flicker of disbelief. Oh, I didn't think you'd bother. Why would I not? He said, his tone almost dismissive, as if it were an obligation he'd simply fulfilled. It's a big deal. You did it, didn't you? Yeah. I replied, my words sharp. I did it. There was a pause on the other end. I could almost hear the gears turning in his mind, deciding how to navigate this conversation. I noticed you didn't mention me in the dedication. I thought that was strange. I blinked, surprised at how easily the words slid out of his mouth. No congratulations. No acknowledgement of my hard work, just that one cold observation. I didn't know whether to laugh or cry at the audacity. Why would I asked, the words coming out before I could stop them. You've been absent. You've been absent my entire life. Why would I dedicate something to someone who's barely been a footnote? Another pause. Then, I don't expect you to understand why I couldn't always be there. Life isn't always convenient, but you should have shown some respect, Leela. A simple mention your father's name in the book, at least. It's not too much to ask, is it? The contempt in his voice was palpable, as though I had wronged him. Not the other way around. I could feel the anger starting to rise in me, the years of frustration welling up. But I kept my voice steady. Respect, I said slowly. You want respect after everything? After you decided my graduation wasn't worth your time, after you couldn't be bothered to show up for anything important in my life? My chest tightened with every word. I gave you enough chances, Dad, enough chances to show up. But you didn't, and now I'm supposed to acknowledge you in my book like you've been there? I did what I had to do, he said, his tone still to calm. You were fine without me. You didn't need me hovering over you, making everything about me. No, I said, each word cutting through the phone line like a knife. I didn't need you. I didn't need your hovering, your silence, your absence. You chose to stay away. And I'm done pretending that I'm still waiting for you to show up. There was a long, uncomfortable silence on the other end. I could feel the weight of his disappointment, maybe in some sick way. He was expecting me to beg him to be a part of my life. But I wasn't that person anymore. I was done with the lies, done with the empty promises. You don't get it, Leela, he finally said, his voice a little quieter now, but still filled with that unyielding coldness. I did what I thought was best. You're the one who can't see that. No, I said, my voice low but firm. You did what was easiest for you. You didn't want to be a father. You wanted to be a bystander in my life, and that's fine. But don't think I'm going to pretend you're part of my story now. Just because I've written a book, I let those words hang in the air, giving him no room to argue. He wasn't going to change my mind. Not anymore. I've never asked for your approval, I continued, my heart pounding. And I'm not going to start now. I'm your father, he said, almost as though it were supposed to mean something more than it did. You owe me some gratitude. I let out a breath, disbelief and anger bubbling up inside me. Gratitude? I laughed, though it was a hollow sound. For what? For not showing up. For being a stranger in my life. For being the one who left and never bothered to come back. I don't owe you anything, Dad. Nothing. He was silent, probably digesting my words, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to take any of it back. The silence stretched, the tension between us growing thicker. But it didn't scare me anymore. I had taken my power back. I didn't need his approval. I had done this without him, and I was proud of it. You made your choice a long time ago, I said, softer now, but no less firm, and so did I. I'm not finished with this conversation, he snapped, his voice rising for the first time. You are, I said, my tone cutting him off. This conversation is over, and with that, I ended the call. The phone went silent. But the weight of his absence still hung in the air. The conversation had gone exactly how I'd expected it to, cold, distant, and unyielding. I wasn't surprised by his reaction, but something inside me had shifted. It had become crystal clear in that moment that I didn't need him anymore. I took a deep breath and set the phone down. The anger that had been simmering for so long now finally starting to fade. I didn't need his apology. I didn't need his acknowledgement. What I had needed all along was to realize that my worth wasn't tied to his absence, that I had always been enough. And that realization, it was liberating. It was freedom. I stared at the phone in my hand, still vibrating from the message that had just come through. The one I had been waiting for, or rather, dreading for so long. The one that had been inevitable. But I hadn't expected it to hurt quite this much. It was from him, my father. I've been thinking about the book and the dedication. I can't believe you left me out. After everything I did for you, you owe me more than this. You've always been ungrateful. His words hit me like a slap. I wasn't surprised, but still. The sting was sharp, my stomach twisted, and I felt the familiar rush of anger flood my chest. It was exactly what I had feared, the blame, the accusation. The way he twisted everything so that I was the one in the wrong. I let the phone fall onto the table, and I closed my eyes, fighting back the rush of emotions. Ungrateful. I let out a laugh, bitter and hollow. For years, I had waited for him to show up. For years, I had wanted his approval, his acknowledgement. But now, here he was, asking me why I hadn't given him what he didn't deserve. And in his mind, I was the one who had done something wrong. I stood up, pacing the room. My mind raced as I replayed his words over and over. How could he? How could he still think I owed him something? I wasn't a child anymore, desperate for his attention. I had written this book for me, for my voice, for my story, not for him. Not for someone who had never cared enough to be a part of it. The anger built inside me until I felt like I was going to explode. I couldn't just let this go. I couldn't let him continue to believe that he still had the right to twist my reality into something that suited him. I grabbed my phone again, my fingers trembling as I typed. I don't owe you anything. You've never shown up for me. You've never been there. I wrote this book for me, not for you. Don't make this about you. You're not in my story anymore. I had sent, my heart pounding in my chest, waiting for his response. But instead of relief, there was only emptiness. His words, even now, still weighed on me. I had done everything to prove I didn't need him. But somewhere, deep down, I still wanted him to see me. I still wanted him to acknowledge the person I had become. The phone buzzed again. I picked it up, expecting a new message. But it was from my sister, Mara. She had been quiet through all of this, staying out of the drama as much as possible. But I knew she saw the cracks in our family, just like I did, Leela. I heard from Dad. You know he's hurt by what you wrote. He doesn't understand why you left him out of the dedication. It's a small thing. Why couldn't you just include him? I felt my blood pressure rise again. A small thing. This was never a small thing. This was years of neglect, years of absence, and she was telling me to just let it go? It wasn't about the dedication. It was about everything he hadn't done, everything he had taken from me, asterisk asterisk. I slammed the phone down on the table, frustration bubbling up. I didn't want to talk to her right now. I didn't want to hear anyone else's perspective on this. It didn't matter if she thought it was a small thing. It wasn't, not to me. The room felt like it was closing in. I needed to get out of my head. I needed to walk. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The streets were quieter now, the city winding down, and I let my feet carry me without thinking. I needed distance from it all. I needed space from the anger, from the weight of what had happened. As I walked, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. My father's name flashed on the screen. I didn't pick up. I couldn't. I knew what he was going to say, and I wasn't ready to hear it. Instead, I called Mara. Hey, she answered, her voice soft, like she was afraid of what I might say. Leela, listen, I know you're upset. No, I interrupted, the words coming out sharper than I intended. I'm not upset. I'm done with this, with him, with all of it. There was silence on the other end before she spoke again, cautiously. What do you mean? He's still your father, Leela. I don't care. I snapped. He hasn't been my father for years. He doesn't get to come in and make demands. I don't owe him anything. Not anymore, she sighed, a tired sound. I get that you're angry. But don't you think you're being a little harsh? You're pushing him away completely. I'm not pushing him away. He's already gone, I said, my voice trembling with the force of it. He's been gone for so long, and I've been pretending I was okay with it. But I'm not, and I'm done pretending I still need him. I don't. Mara was quiet for a moment. I just wish you'd try to understand his side. He's always been difficult. But he's still your dad. Stop, I said, cutting her off. Stop making excuses for him. I'm not doing this anymore, Mara. I've been waiting for him to come around, to see me, to be proud of me. But he's never going to. He never has. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. This wasn't just about him anymore, this was about me. And I needed to stop waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. I can't keep waiting for someone who doesn't even care enough to show up. I'm done. There was another silence, this one thick with tension. Finally, Mara spoke again. Quieter now, okay? I hear you. But just know, you're not alone in this. You've got me, always. I stood there, the weight of her words settling in. I didn't feel the same way about him anymore. But her words, they reminded me that I still had family, people who cared. And maybe that was enough. Thanks, I whispered, I'll talk to you soon, she said, and the line went dead. I stood in the quiet, the phone still pressed to my ear, and let it all sink in. The anger was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I had made my choice. I wasn't going to wait for him to show up anymore, and in that moment, I realized the person I had been waiting for didn't exist anymore. ***, I slammed the phone down on the table, frustration bubbling up. I didn't want to talk to her right now. I didn't want to hear anyone else's perspective on this. It didn't matter if she thought it was a small thing. It wasn't, not to me. The room felt like it was closing in. I needed to get out of my head. I needed to walk. I grabbed my jacket and stepped outside into the cool evening air. The streets were quieter now, the city winding down, and I let my feet carry me without thinking. I needed distance from it all. I needed space from the anger, from the weight of what had happened. As I walked, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a call. My father's name flashed on the screen. I didn't pick up. I couldn't. I knew what he was going to say, and I wasn't ready to hear it. Instead, I called Mara. Hey, she answered, her voice soft, like she was afraid of what I might say. Layla, listen, I know you're upset. No, I interrupted, the words coming out sharper than I intended. I'm not upset. I'm done with this, with him, with all of it. There was silence on the other end before she spoke again, cautiously. What do you mean? He's still your father, Layla. I don't care. I snapped. He hasn't been my father for years. He doesn't get to come in and make demands. I don't owe him anything. Not anymore, she sighed, a tired sound. I get that you're angry. But don't you think you're being a little harsh? You're pushing him away completely. I'm not pushing him away. He's already gone, I said, my voice trembling with the force of it. He's been gone for so long. And I've been pretending I was okay with it. But I'm not, and I'm done pretending I still need him. I don't. Mara was quiet for a moment. I just wish you'd try to understand his side. He's always been difficult. But he's still your dad. Stop, I said, cutting her off. Stop making excuses for him. I'm not doing this anymore, Mara. I've been waiting for him to come around, to see me, to be proud of me. But he's never going to. He never has. I paused, swallowing the lump in my throat. This wasn't just about him anymore, this was about me. And I needed to stop waiting for someone who wasn't coming back. I can't keep waiting for someone who doesn't even care enough to show up. I'm done. There was another silence, this one thick with tension. Finally, Mara spoke again. Quieter now, okay? I hear you. But just know, you're not alone in this. You've got me, always. I stood there, the weight of her words settling in. I didn't feel the same way about him anymore. But her words, they reminded me that I still had family, people who cared. And maybe that was enough. Thanks, I whispered, I'll talk to you soon, she said, and the line went dead. I stood in the quiet, the phone still pressed to my ear, and let it all sink in. The anger was still there, but it no longer consumed me. I had made my choice. I wasn't going to wait for him to show up anymore, and in that moment, I realized the person I had been waiting for didn't exist anymore. The air felt different this morning, lighter, as if something had shifted in the space around me. Something I hadn't even realized was holding me back. The weight of the past, of everything I had carried, was gone. No more anger, no more regret. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring out the window at the city below. The sun was breaking through the clouds, casting everything in a soft, golden light. It felt right. It felt like the beginning of something new, even though I hadn't planned for it to happen this way. The phone sat on my nightstand, its silence almost mocking me. I hadn't checked it since last night. I didn't need to. There was nothing there I needed anymore. No messages from him. No calls I had to ignore. No more waiting for something I would never get. I had stopped waiting. The sound of a knock on the door snapped me out of my thoughts. I rose to answer it, feeling a calmness in my movements that I hadn't felt in years. Sarah stood there, her smile wide as usual, but there was something softer in her eyes today. She didn't say anything at first, just wrapped me in a quick hug. Hey, she said, pulling back and looking me over. You look different. Good, different. I smiled, the sensation feeling natural, effortless. I feel different, I can see that. She stepped into the apartment, glancing Around. I wasn't sure when the last time was that I saw you so centered. I sat back down on the couch, motioning for her to take a seat. I think it just finally clicked. I'm not tied to him anymore. Not his expectations, not his silence, it's over. Sarah sat down beside me, her gaze steady. It's hard, right? Letting go of that weight. But you've done it, you've really done it, I nodded. The peace inside me only deepening as I said the words out loud. I have. And it feels good. Better than I ever expected. I've watched you fight this for so long, Sarah said softly. I think we all have. But you're finally free. You don't need him, Leela. I looked at her. The words not hurting anymore. I used to think I did. But I don't. I never did, not really. There was a pause, the kind that felt like a breath in the space between us. He was never going to be the father you wanted him to be, Sarah said, her voice quiet but firm. And that's not your fault. You're not missing anything by him not being here. I know, I replied, a small smile tugging at the corner of my lips. I've known for a while. But it's different now. I don't need him. I don't need anyone to validate me anymore. Sarah smiled back, that proud glint in her eyes. Exactly. You're enough on your own, always have been. I took a deep breath, letting the truth of it fill me. I was enough. That realization settled into my bones, sinking deep into me. I didn't need to prove myself to anyone, not to my father, not to anyone. I have found my strength on my own. I'm ready to move forward, I said, the words feeling like a promise to myself. I'm not carrying any of this with me anymore. Sarah's smile softened and she reached out to squeeze my hand. You've come so far. You've earned this peace, Leela. I nodded, the peace inside me spreading like a warm glow. I felt lighter, freer than I had in years. It's mine now. I'm so proud of you, Sarah said, her voice full of emotion. You've come out stronger than anyone could have imagined. I didn't do it alone, I said, squeezing her hand back. You've been here the whole time, always. Will be, she replied, her voice steady, unwavering, and so will everyone else who loves you. I looked at her then, really looked at her and felt a wave of gratitude. Not just for Sarah, but for the people who had stuck by me through all the chaos, the hurt, and the uncertainty. They had been my foundation when I didn't even know I needed one, and now, as I stood taller than ever before, I realized that I didn't need anyone to complete me. I was complete on my own. I feel like I can finally breathe, I said, my voice almost a whisper. Like I've been holding my breath for so long, and now I can finally exhale. And you deserve to, Sarah replied softly, her eyes warm. This is your time, Leela. It's yours. I took another deep breath, my chest expanding with the air I hadn't let myself fully inhale before. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel the sting of loss. I didn't feel the weight of his absence. I just felt whole. I'm going to be okay, aren't I? I asked, my voice steady now. Sarah nodded, her smile wide and proud. More than okay, you're going to be incredible. And as I sat there, surrounded by the quiet peace that had settled over me, I realized that I no longer needed permission to move forward. I no longer needed anyone to validate my journey. It was mine, and for the first time in my life, I was finally ready to live it without apology. ***.